She uncovered her husband and mother-in-law plotting arson for insurance. Then she turned them in and had them jail for good. In a quiet residential neighborhood in Stamford, Connecticut, there stood a small 2-story house surrounded by a white picket fence. At 7:30 in the morning, the savory aroma of bacon drifted from the kitchen, and the coffee maker dropped its final drops with a gentle sound. Emily Johnson moved with practiced ease as she plated breakfast, listening to the voices of her husband and son echoing from the living room. "Ethan, put your socks on, we are leaving soon." Her 5-year-old son sat on the floor, completely absorbed in his favorite dinosaur figures. His chestnut hair was tousled, and he wore only a cardigan over his pajamas. Michael sat down beside his son while adjusting his tie, speaking gently. "Let us put our socks on together, Dad, too. It is a race." Michael was a well-groomed man who looked handsome in his gray suit. Working as a financial analyst, he always maintained a neat appearance and moved through his morning routine efficiently. Ethan's eyes lit up at his father's suggestion, and he quickly pulled on his socks. "Daddy wins!" Ethan called out joyfully, and Michael smiled as he ruffled his son's hair. Watching this scene, Emily felt warmth in her heart. Married for 7 years, these peaceful morning moments were what she treasured most. She took pride in supporting the family as a stay-at-home mom and considered it natural to drive her husband to the station each morning so he could focus on work. Breakfast is ready. The three sat at the dining table, spending their morning time as usual. Michael read the newspaper while drinking coffee, occasionally muttering to himself about stock market movements. Ethan ate his cereal while telling his mother about kindergarten events. "We have art time today. I am planning to draw a dinosaur picture. How wonderful. What kind of dinosaur will you draw?" Emily listened to her son's chatter while observing her husband. Lately, Michael had been coming home later more often, and she had noticed him looking tired more frequently. She understood he was busy with work, but sometimes it worried her. The three got into the car. Emily took the driver's seat. Michael sat in the passenger seat and Ethan settled into his car seat in the back. This 15-minute drive was special time for the family. Music played in the car, and sometimes Ethan would sing along while Michael clapped to the rhythm. When they reached the station, Michael gave Emily a light kiss on the cheek and went around to the back seat to say goodbye to Ethan. "Have a wonderful day today. You work hard too, Daddy." When Ethan waved his little hand, Michael smiled and headed toward the station turnstiles. Emily watched her husband's retreating figure, feeling happy. True, Michael seemed tired lately, but that was evidence of how hard he was working for their family. She wanted to support him as much as possible. On the way home, Ethan read his favorite picture book in the back seat. Emily watched her son through the rearview mirror while organizing the day's schedule in her mind. Go shopping, prepare dinner, pick up Ethan from kindergarten, then pick up Michael in the evening. It was the same routine every day, but for Emily, it was a comforting life. When they arrived home, Ethan immediately ran upstairs to his room. Emily put laundry in the washing machine and tidied the kitchen, hoping for another peaceful day. About 3 weeks later, Emily began to clearly sense changes in her husband. Michael's homecoming time grew later each day, where he used to arrive home by 7 in the evening. Recently, it was not unusual for him to come home after 9 o'clock. He would enter through the front door with an exhausted expression, exchange brief greetings, and immediately head for the shower. One evening, as Emily was about to put her husband's suit jacket in the laundry basket, she noticed a faint, sweet perfume scent. It was clearly different from what she used, an elegant floral fragrance. At first, she told herself it might have gotten on him during a meeting with female colleagues at work, but the scent persisted for several days. Michael's relationship with his cell phone had also changed, where he used to carelessly leave his smartphone on the living room table. Now he carried it with him constantly. When messages arrived during dinner, he would quickly check the screen and sometimes leave his seat to make calls in another room. "It is a work emergency," Michael explained it that way, but Emily could sense a subtle tension in his voice. She did not want to doubt her husband, but a small seed of anxiety had begun to sprout in the depths of her heart. Ethan seemed to notice his father's changes too. Where her son used to jump up and hug Michael when he came home, lately he often kept his distance and watched his father. "Daddy, will you read me a story today? I am tired today, so let us do it tomorrow." Each time Ethan heard such responses from Michael, he would sigh softly and head to his room. Watching her son's lonely back, Emily keenly felt that subtle changes were occurring in their family relationships. On Friday afternoon, as Emily was preparing to pick up Ethan from kindergarten, the doorbell rang. When she opened the door, her mother-in-law, Barbara Johnson, stood there. At 58, she was a former real estate agent who always appeared with perfectly styled hair and elegant attire. "Emily, I am sorry to drop by suddenly. I was in the neighborhood." Barbara's smile was friendly, but Emily always felt a subtle tension in their relationship. Her mother-in-law loved her son Michael deeply, and sometimes looked at Emily, her daughter-in-law, with appraising eyes. "Mother-in-law, please come in. Would you like some coffee?" "Thank you. Actually, I wanted to talk to you a little about Michael." The two sat in the living room, and Emily waited for her mother-in-law's words while holding her coffee cup. Barbara seemed to be choosing her words carefully. "Michael seems very busy lately. Work appears difficult, but are you properly supporting him?" Emily felt confused. "Of course, I'm doing everything I can. Men, cannot concentrate on work when there are problems at home. Michael coming home late recently might be because he cannot relax at home." Barbara's words were indirect, but they seemed to suggest that Emily was the cause of her husband's stress. Emily felt resistance in her heart, but responded calmly on the surface. "I do not think that is the case. Michael is just busy with work. Yes, I am sure that is it, but if there are any problems, please consult with me. As his mother, I understand Michael best." Barbara stayed for about 1 hour, mainly continuing to talk about Michael's childhood memories and how excellent and responsible a man he was. Emily nodded along as she listened, but she could not shake the feeling that criticism and distrust of her were embedded in her mother-in-law's words. After her mother-in-law left, Emily sat alone in the living room, reflecting on her words. Certainly Michael's behavior had changed, but she did not think it was her fault. Rather, the feeling that her husband was hiding something grew stronger day by day. In the evening, on her way to pick up Ethan, Emily happened to meet Sarah, the wife of Tom, Michael's colleague. As they chatted, something Sarah casually mentioned stuck in Emily's mind. "Lately, Tom has been worried about Michael. He seems to be feeling pressure at work and acting a bit strange. Is that so? He does not talk to me much at home either. Men do not like to show their weak sides, but according to Tom, Michael seems to be stressed about money lately. Something about failed investments." Emily was surprised. She had never heard Michael talk about investments. She managed the household finances, but she had not particularly noticed increased expenses recently. That night, when Michael came home, Emily gathered her courage and tried to talk to him. "Welcome home. How was your day?" "Same as always." "I am tired," Michael answered curtly and immediately tried to go upstairs. Do you have any worries lately? If there is anything, I would like you to talk to me about it." Michael turned around halfway up the stairs and looked down at Emily. His expression held a coldness she had never seen before. "There is nothing to worry about. You just need to think about household matters." Those words pierced Emily's heart deeply. Since their marriage, they had shared each other's concerns, but now Michael was clearly trying to distance himself from her. Alone in the bedroom, Emily buried her face in her pillow and cried. Her husband's changes, her mother-in-law's critical words, and the feeling that she was becoming isolated within her family, everything overlapped and pressed heavily on her heart. Listening to Michael's sleeping breath beside her, Emily was enveloped in vague anxiety. Tuesday morning was unusually warm for October. Emily prepared breakfast as always, while gazing at the autumn scenery visible through the kitchen window. The maple trees in the neighborhood were beginning to turn beautiful colors, and gentle morning light danced on the lawn. However, her heart was far from peaceful. Last night, too, Michael had come home late and gone to bed with hardly any conversation. "Mommy, are we going to the station with Daddy today, too?" Ethan appeared in the kitchen, rubbing his sleepy eyes. The 5-year-old was wearing his favorite dinosaur slippers over his pajamas and did not seem fully awake yet. "Yes, we will go together as always, the 3 of us." Emily smiled as she stroked her son's hair, but her smile lacked its former naturalness. Lately, this morning commute time had become the only opportunity to spend family-like time together. Michael hurriedly finished breakfast and dressed in his usual suit. But this morning, he seemed somehow restless, checking his watch repeatedly. He also frequently checked his cell phone, occasionally frowning. "Are you in a hurry?" Emily asked, and Michael answered briefly, "I have an important meeting. I cannot be late." Ethan sat in his car seat in the back as usual, but the boy who would normally sing songs or look out the window happily was strangely quiet this morning. Emily looked at her son through the rearview mirror and saw that Ethan was clutching something in his small hands with a thoughtful expression. The drive to the station was wrapped in more silence than usual. Michael stared at his cell phone in the passenger seat, and when Emily tried to talk to him, only absent-minded responses came back. Only the radio music playing in the car filled this awkward silence. When they arrived at the station, Michael quickly got out of the car. Without giving his wife the usual kiss on the cheek, he simply waved briefly and headed toward the turnstiles. Emily watched her husband's retreating figure from the driver's seat, sighing deeply in her heart. "Mommy." Suddenly, Ethan's small voice could be heard from the back seat. When Emily turned around, she noticed her son was looking at her with a serious expression. "What is it, Ethan? We cannot go home today." Emily was confused by her son's words. While starting the car, she spoke to her son through the rearview mirror. "Why not? If we do not go home, I cannot clean or prepare lunch." Ethan paused for a moment, then whispered with a serious expression like an adult, "Daddy." With that one word, Emily's heart began to race. Her son's voice contained a tension that seemed beyond that of a 5-year-old child. She pulled the car to the side of the road and turned completely around to face her son. "Ethan, what about Daddy? Last night, Daddy was on the phone. I secretly listened before I went to sleep." Her son continued in a small voice. "Daddy said, 'Come right after we leave tomorrow morning, and then let us make sure it succeeds.'" Emily's blood drained away. She could not imagine who Michael was talking to or about what, but she could not ignore her son's intuitive warning. "Ethan, did you hear anything else?" It was Grandma's voice. Daddy's mommy's voice, Barbara. Emily's mother-in-law's face floated in her mind. Last week's sudden visit, her defensive words about Michael, and her abnormal interest in her husband. Everything began to connect suddenly. "Mommy, we should not go home. It feels scary somehow." Following her son's words, Emily did not return home directly, but instead parked at a nearby coffee shop. It was a 5-minute walk from there to their house. Walking hand in hand, Emily was grateful for her son's courage. Children's intuition is sometimes sharper than adults, and this morning's warning from Ethan must have been instinctive. When they turned the corner of the residential street, they reached a position where they could see their house. Emily and Ethan hid behind a large oak tree and observed their house. At first, nothing seemed to have changed, but after about 10 minutes, a familiar red sedan stopped in front of their house. It was Barbara's car. Her mother-in-law got out of the car and carefully looked around. In her hands were a small bag and a metallic object Emily did not recognize. Barbara headed toward the front door, but did not ring the doorbell. Instead, she took something out of her bag. It was a spare key. Emily's heart pounded violently. Her mother-in-law opened the front door without hesitation and entered the house. A few minutes later, a faint light was visible from the first-floor window. It was not electric light, but a flickering orange light. "Fire!" Emily gasped. Smoke began rising from the first-floor window. Barbara hurried out through the back door and ran back to her car. Emily took out her cell phone with trembling hands and called 911. "There is a fire. The address is 1247 Willowbrook Drive. Please hurry." After finishing the call to the fire department, Emily hugged Ethan. Her son's small body was trembling with fear, but his eyes held firm determination. "Mommy, are we going to be okay?" "We will be okay, Ethan, because you protected us." The sound of sirens began to be heard in the distance. Emily held her son close, understanding that this morning's events would completely change their lives. Trust in her husband, complex feelings toward her mother-in-law, and above all, her 5-year-old son's courage and intuition. Everything was converging at this moment. The smoke grew thicker, and eventually flames became visible from the windows. Emily waited for the police and fire department to arrive, while beginning to understand the full scope of this terrifying plan. Michael and Barbara had intended to commit arson, targeting the time when she and her son would be at home. The sirens of fire trucks and police vehicles broke the quiet of the residential neighborhood, and neighboring residents came out of their houses one after another, creating commotion. Emily answered police officers' questions while holding Ethan's hand. Her testimony was clear and consistent. She had witnessed her mother-in-law use a spare key to enter the house and intentionally set fire to it. "Ma'am, we would like to hear more details about this incident, so could you accompany us to the station?" Detective Rodriguez, a veteran detective, spoke in a gentle tone. Emily nodded, left Ethan with kind neighboring couples, and headed to the police station. Meanwhile, the fire department quickly suppressed the fire, but the first floor of the house had suffered considerable damage. In the interrogation room at the police station, Emily explained the details of the incident, her son's warning, her mother-in-law's suspicious behavior, and her husband's recent changes. Detective Rodriguez carefully conducted the interview, occasionally taking notes. "Mrs. Johnson, could you tell us more details about your husband's recent behavior?" Emily talked about the changes in Michael's homecoming times, his abnormal attachment to his cell phone, and the scent of another woman's perfume. She also conveyed information from a colleague's wife about possible financial problems. At that moment, the interrogation room door opened, and another detective entered. "Detective, we have arrested Barbara Johnson. She is currently requesting a lawyer." Detective Rodriguez nodded. "What about Michael Johnson?" "We secured him at his office. He appears completely agitated." 30 minutes later, Emily encountered Michael in the hallway of the police station. Her husband was handcuffed and accompanied by police officers. The moment their eyes met, Michael's expression twisted in anguish. "Emily, I want to talk to you. Let me explain." "Michael, why? Why did you try to kill us?" Emily's voice was trembling. Michael stopped and asked the officers for permission. A brief conversation was allowed. "I never intended to kill you. You were not supposed to be at home. After I took you to the station, I was going to contact my mother immediately, confirm that you had gone out shopping, and then execute the plan." "For what purpose?" Michael took a deep breath. "Debt. Gambling debt that reached $250,000. I could not repay it anymore. The fire insurance payout is $300,000. I plan to pay off the debt with that and start fresh with you." Emily was stunned. She had no idea that her husband was a gambling addict, or that he had massive debts. "But what if we had been at home? You were not supposed to be there. You always go shopping with Ethan after the morning commute, do not you?" "My mother was going to confirm that before executing the plan." Hearing Michael's explanation, Emily realized a terrifying fact. Indeed, normally she would often go out shopping with her son immediately after returning from the station. But this morning, because of Ethan's warning, they had not approached the house. Without her son's intuition, they would have returned from shopping to discover the house in flames, and at that point there might have been no escape. As the interrogation progressed, the full scope of the terrifying plan became clear. Michael had become addicted to online poker 6 months ago, and the betting amounts that started small gradually increased. He fell into a vicious cycle of betting larger amounts to recoup his losses. He had temporarily diverted company expenses, but that too was exhausted, and he also borrowed from loan sharks. The interest was exorbitant, and collection calls came every day. Michael was cornered and consulted with his mother, Barbara. Barbara initially tried to take on her son's debt. However, for her, a retired former real estate agent, $250,000 was an amount that would ruin her life. So, the two came up with a solution using fire insurance money. "My mother tried to sacrifice her own life for me, but I thought it was more rational to solve it with insurance money than that," Michael testified during interrogation. The plan was meticulous. Michael would take his wife to the station on a weekday morning, then head to the office. During that time, Barbara would execute the arson and Michael would have a perfect alibi. Emily and Ethan were supposed to be out shopping, and when they returned home, the house would be burning. The family would be safe, and they could start a new life with the insurance money. However, this plan had a critical flaw. No safety measures were considered for the case where Emily and Ethan did not go out as scheduled or returned home early. Barbara had lost her judgment due to love for her son and disregarded Emily and Ethan's safety. During the interrogation, even more shocking facts came to light. The women's perfume that Michael had been smelling lately, actually belonged to multiple dealers working at casinos. After work, he went to casinos almost every night, picking up perfume scents there and returning home. It was not an affair but concealment of gambling addiction. Late homecomings, attachment to his cell phone, everything was related to gambling and debt. The changes Emily had sensed in her husband were evidence that he was leading a double life. When Emily heard the full scope of the plan from the detective, she was struck by deep despair. The husband she loved had disregarded her and her son's lives and tried to put them in danger to solve financial problems. Even more shocking was that her mother-in-law, Barbara, out of blind love for her son, had considered the safety of her daughter-in-law and grandson secondary. "What would have happened if your son had not given that warning?" Detective Rodriguez asked quietly. Emily answered with a trembling voice. "I do not know, but Ethan saved us. A 5-year-old child protected us from the madness of adults." That night, Emily held her son close while reflecting on the events of this terrifying day. Betrayed by a husband she trusted, targeted for murder by her mother-in-law, but saved by her beloved son. Life had completely changed in just one day. But the most important thing, the bond with her son, had not been lost. 1 year later, Emily and Ethan had started a new life in a small town in Vermont, having moved across state lines. The small single-story house in a corner of a quiet residential area surrounded by green hills was incomparably modest compared to their previous luxurious home in Connecticut. But for the two of them, it was a place of heartfelt comfort and peace. Michael was sentenced to 8 years for attempted arson and insurance fraud, and Barbara also received a 5-year prison sentence as an accomplice. Emily completed divorce proceedings with her husband and returned to her maiden name, Wilson. While she was able to receive the fire insurance money, Emily used most of it to pay off Michael's debts and built the foundation for a modest new life with the remainder. Emily, who began working part-time as an office clerk at a small local real estate company, felt the joy of supporting herself through her own efforts for the first time in a long while. Her salary was never large, but it was sufficient for life with just her and her son. Above all, being able to live transparent days without lies or secrets was happiness beyond anything else for her. 6-year-old Ethan quickly adapted to his new elementary school and grew into a bright, active boy. He rarely spoke about the events of that terrifying morning, but the deep gaze he occasionally directed at his mother was filled with understanding and love beyond his years. On weekend afternoons, the two walked in the nearby park. Cherry blossom petals danced in the wind, and gentle spring sunshine warmed their cheeks. "Mommy, what do you think would have happened if I had not heard Daddy's phone call that time?" At Ethan's sudden question, Emily stopped walking. Her son was looking up at his mother with a serious expression. "Very scary things might have happened, but because Ethan protected us, we can be together like this now. I was really scared then, but I thought I had to protect Mommy." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes at her 6-year-old son's words. She would never forget the feeling of her son's small hand gripping hers that morning. Mommy is happy to be protected by Ethan, too. A real family means people who care about each other and help each other when in trouble. In the evening, the two returned home and prepared dinner together in the kitchen. While Emily cut vegetables, Ethan mixed salad with his small hands. It was simple cooking, but meals made together were heartwarming. After finishing their meal, Ethan worked on homework while Emily read beside him. When her son occasionally asked questions about problems he did not understand, they thought together. Such casual daily life was the most valuable time for Emily. At bedtime, Emily read picture books in her son's room. Before Ethan fell asleep, they always exchanged the same words. It had become their habit. "Mommy, will tomorrow be a fun day too?" "It certainly will be, because we have each other." "Yes, I love you, Mommy. I love you most in the world too, Ethan." After turning off the lights and leaving her son's room, Emily sat alone in the living room, reflecting on the events of this past year. Betrayal of love and trust in her husband, hostility from her mother-in-law, and the terror of being targeted for murder. However, having experienced all of that, she could now deeply understand the preciousness of her current peaceful life. Most important was the bond based on true love and trust rather than blood relations. Michael and Barbara were family, but ultimately they tried to sacrifice others for their own benefit. Meanwhile, Ethan mustered courage to protect his mother. Emily understood from her heart that a true family consists of people who support each other, especially during difficult times. Outside the window, the full moon shone quietly. Emily imagined her son's sleeping face while wishing that tomorrow too would begin as another peaceful and happy day. A small house, modest living, but days filled with love. That was the true happiness she had been seeking for so long.